Today is February 28th, 2025. It is 2:22. We are here with Stephanie Lestenkoff Mandregan, and the staff is George Pletnikoff and myself, Aquilina Lestenkoff. May we record you?
Yes, you may.
Okay, so let's just kind of start with like whatever you want to share with name, nickname, even if there's nicknames your parents had for you. If anything you want to share about being born, where you're born, your siblings, grandkids, anything about your family you want to share right now.
Oh, okay. My name is Stephanie Lestenkoff Mandregan, like you said. Unanga from St. Paul Island. I am 59 years old. I lived here almost all of my life on St. Paul, with a few years in other places. I am the youngest of 9 children. My oldest sibling being 28 years older than me, and my closest sibling being 5. So by the time I was 10, 11, 12, 13, I kind of almost felt like I was an only child. And we go and visit these adult people who are my siblings in other towns and in other states. So it was different. My parents were also older by the time I came along. I was unexpected at my mom's age of 46 and my dad's age of 52. And they shared a lot as I was growing up, that they were appreciative that they could be alive at, since they had me at their ages, that they were still around when I was an adult, because it was something that they weren't sure was going to happen. So I appreciate that. I'm married, going to be 31 years now, to my husband Mac. We have 4 kids. He has 2 from a previous marriage. And then again, I did the same thing with my oldest kid to my youngest kid. There's a 20-year age difference between them, so I think I had to carry on that tradition. 2 granddaughters, very rambunctious, smart, and intelligent 4-year-olds who will talk your ear off. I forgot what else I was.
Did you have any story about how you got your name, how you got named?
My name?
Yeah.
My middle name, Doreen, was picked by my brother Agathon, who is no longer with us. And I think that my parents didn't have a name for me, and he's the one, I was told, that picked my name when I was born. Mm. I was 4 when he died. I don't have any memories. I mean, I have stories of what you shared and what families shared, but I have no real memories until I was like late 4, maybe 5 years old, 6. It just kind of, the world was a blank. Mm. I was named after my mom. She was Stefanita, so I'm Stephanie. When I was little, and when I was still nice, they called me Precious. That name ended shortly before I became a teenager, because I wasn't Precious anymore. I was Dika.
Oh, fun. Let's see. So tell us about like what you want, anything you want to share with your childhood, your teens. Describe like growing up. I mean, responsibilities, just the everyday meals or school or first job, anything.
It's like when you grew up here, we were talking about how there didn't seem to be a lot of traveling back then. People traveled maybe once or twice a year. People are going everywhere all the time now. So the community, even though there were more people, kind of felt smaller, and you knew more people. Today, if you ask kids who people are in the community, they might not recognize people. But back when you were a kid, you kind of knew who everyone was, mm-hmm. because people were more socially active with each other. They had events, and you just knew people. It was closer, and we didn't have like TV and stuff. There was no televisions. I remember when TV came, I was maybe between 6 and 7, and we didn't have telephones back then. We had CB radios, and when we got a first TV in our house, it pretty much sat there unused because it wasn't an option yet. So we got the TV before it was even available. And the first night it got plugged in, I was really excited. We were watching a show, so I called called my best friend and cousin Julianne on the CB radio, and I said, "Hey, we have TV. What are you watching at your house?" Not knowing there was only one single channel. But before that, the school kind of would entertain kids on weekends, and they had the big giant VHS tapes where they had Sesame Street and Electric Company. So Saturday or Sundays, it seemed like it was every Sunday, we go to the school library, which was in this location. The school used to be here.
This location being where the Civic
Right, where the
Center.
Civic Center is, and watch tapes. And it was like an hour or two, and that was entertainment. Spent a lot of time playing outside, a lot of time being creative because you didn't have external entertainment, so you had to entertain yourself, which is where I started crafting and creating things. That was how I spent my time.
I like to recall how for some reason I didn't pick up the crocheting and the type of crafting you did. I felt like I was more paperwork oriented or something. Like Dad, I would work with his papers. And but I like when you started crocheting clothes for your Barbie dolls and their fake boobs would be showing through the clothes.
It's like you didn't have your Krusna was the one who taught me how to crochet. I would go to her house, and I still have a crochet hook that she gave me. I use it, I don't use it because I don't want to break it, but I still have it in my pile. And I would go to her house, and she taught me how to crochet. And when I was little, I also learned how to skin sew. I would go to Ludi's house, and in her basement we would skin sew. Yeah, and it's like you didn't have a pattern, you didn't have books, you didn't have YouTube, so you basically made your own knots with what you knew how to do. So there were a lot of Barbie clothes with a lot of holes in them.
So you mentioned the school, the first school building before the one now in 2025 that was here in this location. You went to that school.
I went to this school.
Do you remember what that was like?
Yeah. You walked to school both, uphill both ways. Actually, uphill one way. We didn't get rides to school when we were young. Even as a teenager, we never got rides to school. It was you walked in any kind of weather and you got to where you're going. So I remember walking up here in blizzards, and I went here in kindergarten and first grade here. In second grade, we moved down to the new school. And so the kindergarten room and the first grade room were on the first floor of the building, which I guess would be considered a basement because it was a 3-level building, and it's like the upper levels were kind of like mysterious and stuff, so you never really got to go up there unless you were told to go up there by somebody. So there was, I get to go upstairs. I could still remember what the building looked like. It seemed like a really great building, like one of those historical landmarks you still wish were here. We had back then paddling, and you were scared of your teachers. I mean, you liked them. I know I liked my teachers, but you always had a little bit of fear. I don't think that happens anymore. But I still remember my first and kindergarten and first grade teacher.
What are their names too?
I remember the kindergarten name. I remember the teacher. I can't remember her name, but my first grade teacher's name was Mrs. Morrison, who lived in the house that you live in now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think she was also a principal. She might have been a teacher, or maybe a principal.
I don't know. She was the one time that in school that paddling happened up until at least third grade that I can remember. Definitely third grade because, but I got paddled in first grade, and I was so humiliated. I decided that was never going to happen again, so I never let it happen again. It was by her.
And that was quite a person behind a paddle. She was not a small woman.
She was tall and she was big.
And she wore clogs.
She did.
They were noisy.
She had to wear boots to walk across the snow in that, though, because I couldn't imagine walking in clogs in the snow.
And the floor was wooden in the school building, so clogs on the...
When you think of the smell of that school on Friday afternoons, they made popcorn in the main room, and I don't know if they sold it or gave it away. I don't remember that part of it, but I always remembered it always smelled like popcorn on that first floor.
Yeah. No microwaves, so it was really made in a popcorn machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they sold it actually out of the bottom door now that you bring it up.
Our mom worked in the school, so she did the snacks in the mornings. So everybody had, I think everybody in our age thinks of that. I think that was part of one of the reasons people love pilot bread so much, because we ate a lot of pilot bread for breakfast. Pilot bread with spread, pilot bread with butter, pilot bread with peanut butter and jelly, or peanut butter and raisins.
And cheese.
And powdered milk. Some smells get etched into your mind forever, you know. Powdered milk is one of them.
Did you, I don't know if you would remember this, but I guess maybe in that age group of K1, but the snacks happened down at the new school
Yep,
as well, so
they
you
did.
remember that.
Yes.
Did you have, do you remember how it got brought from the kitchen to the classroom?
They were transported on trays. I think they had a rolling thing because there were multiple classrooms. So I'm not sure about this building, but I know that they were all put onto trays and they were brought to the classrooms. And
Here, because it was a multi-layer, they might assign a couple of kids to go to the kitchen, and one brought the tray with the crackers, and the other person brought a glass jug of milk. And I remember somebody dropping and breaking and this milk going all over the place one time on the lower floor. In
those glass containers happened. Those were wine jugs. Those were wine jugs. They mixed the milk in big bowls, and they were poured into those wine jugs, and those were used even down there at that school.
Yeah. I wonder if that came from the church, or how the wine.
I think they did.
The gallon jugs, green bottles.
Kind of like that Coca-Cola.
Yeah, the one that, yeah. Yeah, I brought a old Coca-Cola bottle that was up in the attic at the house that had holy water in it.
Wow.
That Dad had. So, from the 60s, I think, I don't remember. It had a date on it. It was pretty old.
Here's a funny story about holy water. You know how people go to, in St. Peter and Paul's Day, they make holy water and stuff. You bring home the little containers. They started selling those pre-decorated containers so you could tell what they were. And so we had one in a refrigerator on the door handle. And one day Matt came in and Kara was drinking water out of there. And he's like, hey, that's holy water. You only drink that for, like, if you need special prayers or for special occasions. She's like, that's okay. I always fill it again.
Oh, so she had finished it.
She was drinking it.
That's funny. Do you remember, like, meal times, your home life, or responsibilities?
Oh, yeah.
Siblings and...
You were the only one there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to be home for dinner every day. We had duties. We always had dish duty, so mealtime was a place that you were always there every time. You never missed. And so you set the table, got it ready for everybody. Mom fixed the food and then served Dad and served. So she was like the lady in the Christmas Story, and she never had a hot meal because she was always fixing food for her husband. And once the dinner was done, kids always had to do the dishes. So we did the dishes and we did the cleanup. And then that was just ritual. Family dinners, it was the same thing. Kids did all the dishes. Parents would bring things but we ended up doing it all while the parents visited.
You remember the priest house?
I do.
Being in the priest house?
I do. I have vision. I have dreams about the priest house all the time, and being scared of the basement and spiders and just being scared of it in general. But even though I played down there when I was a kid, yeah, we would have every Sunday there was Sunday brunch after church. Mom would make she did over easy eggs for everybody. She never scrambled eggs, and she made everybody's individually, but she would make things like a dessert or something to go with the night before. And even when they had the restaurant, she did that. So it was a Sunday tradition, and people would come over. There were people from the Coast Guard. I don't remember their names, but I know that there are people who would go to church and they would come for dinner, and John Mazekin was always there, and any other people, and they would sit and chat, and quickly as time goes by, you think, I mean, it for me as an adult, and that would eat into your day, but it didn't seem like it took too long. Church was
Yeah.
out at 12. People were out of the house by 2, and you had your afternoon to do things. Stars to John Mazekin gave me a whole collection over time of silver dollars that I kept. I kept those until I was an adult. But when I was in Colorado, they got stolen. So I was so sad just because of the sentiment behind them, keeping those that long. And he was the reason I got to drive really early. I started driving when, like, really early, because my dad would let me drive him home. He would sit in the vehicle with us, and he would let me drive him home. He lived uptown where, I want to say Skipper lives now.
It was like the next.
Oh, it's
or-
136
Yeah.
yeah. So he lived there, and so I got to learn how to drive early. And
What kind of vehicle?
gosh, we started out in the Gremlin, I think. It was the Gremlin. He actually let me drive him home once by myself. And I remember Dad teaching me how to drive, and he wasn't like, do this, do that. But one time we were driving out to East Landing, and he was going, and he hollered, "Stop!" And I slammed on the brake, and he was like, "Never listen to your passenger. You are the driver. You're the one who has to remember what to do. Don't ever listen to your passenger. They'll call," you know.
He did the exact same thing to me. I pushed on the brakes too. Well, at least you're out there. I was like on a road, I think, going past where Jason Merkuliev lives right now, and he
Yeah.
didn't.
That he let me drive. He let me do, of course, it was going down to Golden Gate Gardens, and so that was a pretty no. But he let me drive from Nick's house down there to the beach when we were in Seattle too, before I even had a license.
So, speaking of being mobile, I recall you were the owner of a Honda. Also, you tell us about getting a Honda 70. Was it?
Yeah,
And how old you
that was
were?
back in the day when Capener rented the Honda 70s, Honda 90s, and I think 3-wheelers at the time. We just so wanted to go down there because all the kids got to ride down there, and Dad would never ever let me rent from them. And one time I got a hold of some money, and we actually did rent. Julianne and I, we rented. I don't remember what it was we rented. Probably Honda 70s. We got in trouble
Without
for
letting
it.
them know.
Without letting them know. So back then you got everything on the boat, I think. And so he got me a Honda 70. And we were living up here at House 115. So I had to been, I don't even know what age, 11, 12. So we had, Julianne and I had Honda 70s, and we rode all over the place. And I remember learning how, he was like, you have to ride around in circles, and you have to learn. Nobody just not telling you what to do, just, stay in this area and figure it out kind of thing. So we rode in the area behind the house between the rec hall and our house, and then down in the priest's house area. So I was riding circles around the house down there, and I lost control of the motorcycle and I drove into the graveyard. That was my first crash. So I remember back then you never wanted to get in
Did
trouble.
you have a helmet?
Always.
Okay.
That was the rule. You had to have a helmet. And so Julianne got one shortly after I did, so we rode everywhere. And I remember one time we wanted to go out to Tasmania, because I think Piama was camping out there. So we wanted to stop by there. So Julianne and I decided we were going to ride out there. So I wrote a note. I didn't tell Mom and Dad. Well, I did tell them, but I wrote a note. I didn't ask them if I could do it. I said, "We're riding around the island. I'll see you later." And that was a big no-no. Back then, parents, because we had a sibling that died at a young age, were kind of protective, and they wanted to make sure, like, I was never able to go down to the beach. I was never able to go on to the dock because they had to sneak and do it. Mm-hmm. There were areas you couldn't go. You weren't allowed. And I did not know that going around the island was one of the things I wasn't allowed to do until we came around. We went out to Southwest and drove around like Tasmania and pulled up to Marunik. And we got to Marunik, and Mom and Dad were sitting there in a vehicle. The maddest look on their face. And so I was grounded and in trouble.
I wonder if that's when I got to use the 70. And I think I bent your handlebars. Had to like figure
Oh,
out.
we had quite a few crashes, and like I said, you didn't want to get in trouble, so the best way to not get in trouble was just not say anything at all. I remember getting a pair of brand new shoes, and the first thing I did was I burned a hole in it from the muffler, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna get in trouble for this, and so we went there with a marker to try to mark it out, and then sewing, using thread and trying to cover the hole. I was devious. And then I one day we were driving down the road, and Julianne, they were playing softball, and Julianne stopped, and I was looking this way and I didn't know she stopped, and I drove into her, and I broke her light on her bike, and so we had to come up with money to go to Cape Nurse and buy replacement parts, like the new cover, new housing.
Oh my. Do you have recollections of Christmas programs?
Christmas programs were a big deal. It seems like whenever we had Christmas programs, there was way more practice than there seems to be now. I don't know. I think there was more time for other things. I mean, you still had your reading, writing, arithmetic that you got done, but they made time for extra stuff like singing and dancing, and it seemed like the last half of December back in the day when we had only one single program, like we did. This was the first time in 2024 where the Christmas program was held only once, not as a practice program while the teachers were still here, and a final program in the evening of the 24th. And I think 30 years. I think it's been 30 years since there was a single Christmas program instead of two. But they were held over at the rec hall. Here's the thing about the rec hall too, is back when I remember when the school was here in this building, we didn't have a gym attached to this school. So the rec hall, the big room upstairs was the gym. And so there were basketball courts. And so we would go over there and play. I remember playing duck, duck, goose over there. But I remember the floor being super clean. I remember having to take our shoes off before we went into the building or into the big hall and being able to play in the room. And they took care of the floor, and I think people respected it. But when we had the programs over there, it was that we practiced up there. And I remember we talked about the stage recently being different the way it was. We would, instead of when it was time for your turn to go up on stage, we somehow, I don't know if the side doors were still there, but I remember waiting in the eaves on the side of the stage to be able to go in before your performance. And I think she's thinking I'm going to tell about the year that we had Christmas trees. I think I was in first grade. And so we had to do this performance where the boys were Christmas trees, and they had their face stuck through paper trees, and we had ornaments in a box. And as you sang the song, you had to put your ornaments on the tree, and the ornaments had glitter on them. And so by the time the Christmas program came, and after practicing and stuff and transporting them over to the rec hall, all of the glue or all of the tape that would hold my ornaments up were covered in glitter, so none of my ornaments would stick on the tree. So I had a naked tree at the end of the song. Dougie was my tree, Dougie Malavita. I probably would have forgotten that, but Debbie's brought that up a few times. So, but you start to sweat when you're in front of an audience, and you know what's supposed to happen. It doesn't.
So later after elementary school and in the new school, tell us about the on-stage production. How there was, I don't know if it was a class with.
We had a teacher when I was in ninth grade. We had a teacher that came out who was he played piano. And part of his teaching history was he was a music teacher. He was our language arts teacher at the time, but he had a love of playing music. I think he worked with a couple people. I know Ilidor Mikuliev was one that he worked with to learn how to play piano, because Ilidor liked to play keyboard and stuff. And I think he taught him songs and taught him stuff. So I think he still plays today. But he wanted to do performances like he had done in wherever he was from. He had a southern accent. I can't remember where he was from. But so he wanted to do like performances in the school and invite the community. And the first one we did was all high school. There were no kids involved. And we did skits and songs, and we had to dress up. And it was like we planned it, and there was like a whole extravaganza at the gym, and community was invited, and people were ushered in, and it was a couple of hours of entertainment. Teeman videotaped it. I have those old, was pre-VHS, and they were big giant tapes, and he recorded all of the performances, and when they switched them to VHS, he was able to put them on VHS for me. And so I have it. I've always wanted to get it transferred to DVD. It's very dark and grainy, so I'm not sure how that would transfer. But we had to dress up in costumes, which really were just other people's clothes. Stuff to make to fit. We did like a 50s era thing where the guys sang songs and then love ballads and plays. And I can't remember how many kids there were in high school, but there were quite a few. And we were kind of shy about it at first, but by the time we were done, it was really exciting and it was a fun thing to do and everybody enjoyed it. And then, so that was a hit because the gym was filled. It was down at the school.
So none of it ever happened on stage up here?
No, it was all in front of the school. The first one was like on the wall where the basketball hoops are. We set it that way. And then we did another performance. I don't remember if it was Christmas. I know we did at least, there was one in the spring too. I don't know if there was 3, but I know there definitely was 2. And the second one was school-wide. And all the classes had different songs that they did. So, and Sam worked with them, and I think he worked with the teachers to put it all together. We also worked, we did stuff. We spent a lot of time at his place. He's lived down at the A-dorm where Joe Kozloff works now. That was teacher housing. Had other teachers that lived down there, but we would do like skits and stuff in school, and we would have practices down there for performances. I don't know if they ever happened, but they were only in the classroom.
I don't know what she played, maybe you might remember, but I remember how Teresa Freitas Baker now almost did like a Carol Burnett.
Yeah,
Like,
that was probably
hilarious.
I don't know if that was King of the Road. We did King of the Road was one of the songs that we sang. King of the Road and Hit the Road Jack, are those 2 different songs?
Mm-hmm.
And there were songs where people could do that were comedy skits like Crabs Walk Sideways and Lobsters Rock Straight, and people would act out the songs, parts of it as they were working on it. And Teresa Baker, she there was one performance, it was a whole like 15-minute thing, and she was hilarious. She changed her voice, and she really got into character, and she did it well. Yeah.
I couldn't remember what the character was, but I remember it stood out to me.
Yeah. She was really good at that.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. So you went through high school. How many years here, and what happened for you
Up
after
until
that?
11th grade. When we were in
And
the 11th
this was like
grade,
in the 80s?
1980, 82, 83. 83, I was it was my 11th grade year, 82, 83. And I'm not sure why they were contemplating back then. I mean, Edgecombe was open before that, because I remember kids in a couple grades ahead of me who went to Edgecombe, and they closed it for some reason. So it was closed for a couple years. And so they asked the question here, and they asked it of the students, and I think students voted whether we wanted to have a full high school here all the way through 12th grade, or to shut it down and have 10th grade. Oh, I don't remember if it was 9th grade to 10th grade, leave to go to school other places. And I was 11th grade, and you're feeling sassy and thinking, oh, I want to go someplace else. I'm going to try something new. And so my senior year, I went to Palmer. And so that was the start of having to go someplace else. There was quite a few of us who were between Palmer and Wasilla, staying with foster families, and graduated there.
Do you remember who went from here?
Yeah,
Along with you.
I know some of the St. George kids. I know Jonas and his brother General were in Wasilla. In Palmer, it was myself, Ivan, Ambrose, Nick Tari, Mary McCoy. Some people went to Anchorage. Some people went to East High. And by Mike McCoy. And all of us graduated in '84
From Palmer High School.
from Palmer High School. I can't remember if
Did
Taryn
anybody
was
come
there.
in after that?
To Palmer? Yeah,
After
I know.
you?
I know that the people that I stayed with, I was kind of shy and quiet and just used to being told, doing what you were told. So the people that I stayed with, they loved me. I was great. I don't think they had quite so much luck with the people who stayed there after me. I think they had a little bit of trouble because they didn't do it again. So I know the class after me, at least, they went out and stayed with foster families in Palmer and Wasilla.
And if I recall correctly, Dad had a car that he had
He
access
did.
to it.
Philip, when Philip was going to college, he had a Pontiac Ventura. It was a brown car with like a tan cloth top, and I guess it was in storage that whole time. And so they pulled it out of storage so I could use it. And where I lived out in Palmer, we kind of lived out in the sticks on the other side, past town and everything, on these gravel roads out in the subdivisions, and didn't do very well. I remember driving off the side of the road into a ditch one day, and at least I got to go to Anchorage a couple times in it before I ran it out of oil, because nobody told me you had to change oil in vehicles.
Did you, a little bit back to the time here, I remember, did you have student government here when you were in school?
We did. We had, I think there was student government every year, 9th, 10th, 11th, that I was here. They did elections and all that kind of stuff, and people ran for office, and people voted. I want to say it was my 10th grade year that it might have been 9th or 10th. They turned it, whoever was the teacher here at the time turned it into a big whoop-de-doo thing where it involved community. And we put posters out. And even though I think the community could vote on, and you had to have a platform and what you stood for, and they made us go up and give speeches and what you represent and what you believe in, and we did those in the gym in front of the school and anybody in the community who came. And you could try to encourage people to vote for you. I remember we got a hold of some lime in writing on the ball field in big giant letters. We had one party was called TAPS and one party was called TOPS. I couldn't remember what they stand for now, but people doing different things, the different parties doing different things to try to encourage community members to support their cause as well.
Cool.
And I was running against, I want to say Jama. I think Jama or Vladimir on
And
the
you
other
were
side.
living in the same,
We
under
were
the
living
same
in the
roof
same
at the
house.
time?
Didn't cause any animosity between us at all. But I didn't win. I know that. But it everybody got involved. The students were all involved in that. And we also, back then, we had sports were a big thing. They are a big thing now. But we got Letterman's jackets. We had cheerleading. I was a cheerleader. And we did events where we had like initiation into being in the sports arena. Miss Edna was involved with that, and the teachers, the Bowens, were here, and I think they enjoyed interacting with kids and stuff, so they hosted a lot of that. So they did initiation, like made you reach in and grab things you didn't know, and they took us into the bathroom that's across from the principal's office, and made us think we were digging in the toilet and touching things in the toilet. And like they smeared her hand with chocolate when we were done, So you open your blindfold and you had brown all over your hand. And the bowl of bananas that they had in there was taken away before that.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I remember the taps and tops terms. There was a photograph of, and I think you were in it with your peers here in the Civic Center picketing.
Yeah. They were having discussions about meetings, and there were all kinds of people here. I think that was ninth grade was a really busy year. There was a lot of things happening. They
Was that
were
about
talking about
82?
first seal, right?
Was that about 82?
81, 82,
81.
yeah.
That's like the pre-government pullout.
Yeah. And
discussion.
so I here's where my memory thing is. I remember coming up here, and I think it was encouraged by local people that were here to bring students up here, and we kind of were used to represent community feelings. So we all had signs that we wore across paper and talked about the seal harvest, or gave your opinion. And so we walked up from the school in those, and walked into the middle of the meeting. And I think it was a circular setup, and so we walked around with our I don't know if they were picket signs or this is our opinion signs.
Do you have any recollection of that government pullout? It was like in 1983.
1983. I was in I was going to school. I was going to school in Palmer, and it was one of the trips that the day that it happened, Mom and Dad were in Anchorage, and Dad would say, we really love you. If we didn't love you, we wouldn't drive out to Palmer and pick you up, bring you back to Anchorage, and then take you back. And that's 4 trips for us. 4 trips in one day. But they brought me into Anchorage, I think, for the weekend. I think it was a Friday. And there was a whole big spread in the newspaper, and it was all in color. But I remember Dad looking at it because he was an avid newspaper reader, and looking at all the stories and all the pictures of everything that was happening here.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool. Shucks, there was like something that was on the top of my head in regards to all of that. After high school, where did life lead you?
After high school, when I was leaving, or after I graduated, I came home and immediately got pregnant, which I hid from my parents successfully for 6 months. I was terrified. It took me so long to tell them. I was house sitting at the time. I decided I have to tell them because I couldn't get any clothes that were any bigger to hide in. And it took me probably an hour from the Calidor entry to getting into the living room, just dread, not sure what their reaction would be, because they had told me my whole life, you have to do this, you have to go to college, I don't want you to, be stuck at home and be a parent, and you have to do this, because that was something that stressed for me my whole life. It was like when you were a kid, a B was a bad grade. I mean, you had to have A's, or you had to stay home and you had to study and you had to fix it, and it just, things that were not allowed. So I aced school all the time because of that, because you just had to. But then, so I stayed here for the year. By the time I had Aaron, it was March of 85. And so after high school, I got a job at the school. So I worked as the receptionist at the school from 85 to 86. And in that time, when I was pregnant with him and then he was born, I worked on being able to go to college. So in 86, August, we left here, my little six-month-old baby on my back, 4-month-old, and we went to Greeley, Colorado. I don't know why I picked Greeley. I think it was green. I'm not sure. There was no rhyme or reason. It's like that's one of the things you don't think about, or I didn't think about back then. And hopefully they've improved it, that you focus a little bit more on your interests. I was looking for a place to go, and that sparked my interest. So I went to college in Colorado, and Aaron was little. I was only there for a year. Again,
By this time, the parents were living in Seattle, right?
Yeah, when I decided I was going to leave, they decided they were going to leave too, and I was like, but I won't have any place to come home to. Where would I go? Say they moved to Seattle right after I did, so I remember them being here, and before I left, we were selling stuff and getting rid of things, and because they were going to go. It felt really sad.
Mm.
It felt sad. But then I liked their place in Seattle, so by the time I got to go there, I think at Christmas, I went there for Christmas with Aaron, and so got to see their place that they just got there. I did only the one school year in Colorado, and then moved to Seattle and stayed with Mom and Dad. Went to community college there for sign language interpreting, and then worked. I worked 2 jobs. I worked like at a fish restaurant down the way, and at school I took notes for people who had hearing disability or visually impaired. So I was a note taker for them, and that was a good experience. There was a daycare in the school, so Aaron got some exposure to other kids, and so he didn't have to stay at home with. And Mom and Dad watched him a lot. They were very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
we were.
think Mom probably had him in training to like hold the dustpan when he would get the dustpan and she was sweeping the floor.
Oh yeah. There's this one time Mom was telling me, you have to watch what you say in front of your kids, because kids listen to everything you say. Because I walked by a rug one day and I messed up the rug, and it had a wrinkle in it and I didn't see it, and Aaron went behind me and went, Jesus Christ, Mom, and fixed the rug. So even as an adult, my mom was teaching me, things to do, and I try to tell that to my kids too. Is your parents are always going to tell you something. They're always going to give you their opinion. It doesn't mean that they think you're doing something wrong. It's just they want to share what they know, and by the time they're an adult, they know a lot. So their words are wise. So listen to your parents.
Right.
Listen to your parents. They will always look for the best. And they want the best for you.
And then you came back here.
I came back here. We came just to visit.
Did Mom and Dad come too about the
They
same
came
time?
later. Actually, I came in. We spent a few years in. I stayed in Seattle we stayed there for 3 years, and I worked summers, worked all the time, but went to school in the winters and took the summers off, and came here in 1989 because I heard there were job opportunities that you could make mega bucks. Come to Alaska, They were working on the harbor project, and so Aaron stayed with Mom and Dad in Seattle while I came out here first, and I applied with. The company was Kiewit. They were working on the harbor that's here now, not the broken harbor from before. So the harbor, the breakwater that's still there.
The breakwater that didn't broke.
Breakwater did break. So they were doing local hires for drivers and for flaggers. And so when I signed up as a flagger. And so I stood down at the corner by the King Eider between the annex and the old building that no longer is.
Where the basketball court
is, Cascade. Mm-hmm. And there was a flagging station there, so that was my station. And I don't know how I kept saying I want to drive the truck. I want to drive these trucks. I want to try to drive these trucks. And I think I got an opportunity to talk to somebody, or maybe I knew somebody who was driving who asked if I could try, and they're like, you can try. You'd have to take a trial run and a test run to see how you do, because some people can't handle it and some people get scared. So they let me practice, do a few runs between the harbor and the quarry where the big rock was stored. All the rock that's on the breakwater now, they hauled when they got them off the barge. They took them out to the quarry and they would store them there until they needed it, and they would bring them back, and they were compiled into different sections of sizes of rock. And so I drove well, so I was hired, and they put me on night shift. So that was my first experience of working like 12-hour days. We did 12-hour days at night. Don't recommend it, night shift. It's like you don't have a life. So it's a good thing that Aaron wasn't here, because I was just basically sleeping and working and sleeping and working. And so what they had me doing when I first started out was just basically driving in the quarry, and we're moving. They were getting the rock from the pit that's there now. They were digging it out and dropping it over the edge to the bottom side, on the flat area where you drive into the quarry, so it could be picked up by day shift. And so quite an experience driving back to a tipple pile to drop your pile over the edge in the dark, because basically you're driving blind, because there's no lights out there other than light fixtures that are in front of you.
Did they have people flagging, like
No,
tiny?
no. Basically what it is there's a lip on the tipple pile that goes up. So you drive back until you feel the lip, and then you stop and dump your pile. If you don't feel the lip, you drive over the edge. And we had a cousin who did that. She truck tipped over backwards. But these were 777s. They were 7-ton trucks. They were big. I was halfway up a tire. There were 3 different trucks, and one of them, the ladder was so high I couldn't reach it to get on it. So luckily, I was able to get in the good truck where the ladder was lower, and I was able to reach it to climb up in there.
The hard hat story.
Oh, yeah.
Is that when you were driving?
That was when I was driving. So when we were driving, it was a 12-hour day. So I'd go to work early in the morning, and it was still dark. And you didn't get off all day. You brought a brown bag your lunch. And so you had I think a half an hour lunch break, maybe 15 minutes. And so I was staying at your house, and you had a cat named Cozy. And so one day, I always left my hard hat out in the Calidor entryway. And one day, I went to work, walked down to work as usual. I would walk down from down the road past the old machine shop and go to work, and carry my hard hat and not put it on until I got to work. And so I got in my truck, and I put my hard hat on, and water started pouring down, and it was cat urine. It was cat pee. And I was the only girl driving. I think I was working day shift then. After I worked night shift for a while, they moved me to day shift. And so it was a day shift that I was working on. And I didn't think I could ask to go home. And I couldn't not drive without a hard hat. So I had to wear that hard hat until lunchtime. And I ran, because I only had those few minutes. So I ran home, and so I could wash my hair and then come back. Then I did ask for a new hard hat. But I had to wear a urine-filled hard hat pouring down my head from 7 in the morning until 12 o'clock in the afternoon. Cozy. There was one time when I was driving too, I actually taught people how to drive. When I had people who had interested, they did morning shift or day shift and night shift. So there were 3 vehicles at least that I know of that were running all the time, and with only a little bit of break in between. So I taught people how to drive, and I remember teaching Amos Filimonov how to drive, and he drove for a while, but taking him through and driving thing. And there was one day that they had a setup where the where City is now, out by the gas station, that was their setup. There was a garage there. They had like it was like a portable garage there where they worked on all their vehicles. And my vehicle, when I got in the morning, was in the shop, so I couldn't use it. So I ended up with another vehicle. My favorite vehicle number was 22. I got 64, so I was driving 64 that day, and Amos got pulled on a little while later. And so they gave him my vehicle, and he was coming around Telegraph, and his steering wheel came off. Mm-hmm. He was able to push it down and use it to maneuver to get over to the side of the thing. But could you imagine being in a 7-ton truck and your steering wheel comes off?
Wow.
That was crazy. Those things were so huge.
Was there a difference in salary between night and day shift? Or there was no difference?
I don't think so. I remember though, I'll tell you the story about when I went to Seattle for Christmas, and that was the end of the driving. It was getting weird driving in the snow, because I remember driving in the mud and driving up in the quarry, and sliding in the mud and actually climbing up the side of Telegraph Hill and looking around, and I was there and nobody was around, so I just kind of backed down. And we had CB radios, which you could hear Hawaii, you could hear other places on those CB radios. And Slim, the guy who worked with the company, he was like, I saw that. So I drove out. My tracks stayed there for about a couple years. You could see where my tracks went up into the hill and then back down. And so it was kind of scary when you would slide. And Slim tried to talk me into staying with the company.
At that time, the road was different. Like, so the road went next to Icehouse Lake and turned up, so it was more, right?
It was.
It wasn't like now where it goes, that wasn't a road. It was like you had to drive past
where the
Icehouse
road is
Lake.
now was part of the grasslands.
Yeah. So
So the road went farther down towards the pond, like Icehouse Lake.
yeah.
And yeah.
So there was an actual. So that's why it would. Because right now it's not too. But back then it had more of an incline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was steep. There was one time they took us out to Lake Hill too. Frank Shane was using a bucket. He was he was driving a truck then too. But they had us go out to Lake Hill I think they were getting scoria for something, and they had us drive out there. And every day you stopped at lunch at 12 o'clock. You had your 20-minute, 30-minute lunch. So both Frank and I were out there, and we were by ourselves, and it's like 12 o'clock. So we stopped working. Both of us sitting in our trucks eating our lunch, and then somebody from the company comes out and is like, "What are you guys doing?" "We're having lunch." "We're still working." "Go back to work." That was like the story of Vlas Shablin was a flagger. He was at the corner by the old dock before Point Warehouse. Or not Point Warehouse, but before the old fish plant. And there was a corner there where that was at the turn by the old gas station. And he was flagging there, and Dad came down when they came to visit. He wanted to get a picture of me. And I was driving by. He's like, "Who's that boy up there?" And Blas says, "That's your daughter."
That was like still in summertime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was only, because everybody was in proximity of a bathroom, you could go to the King Ider to go to the bathroom. There was only one flagging station that had a porta potty, and that was at the corner where the post office is now, because that person stopped the traffic coming down the main hall road so we could take the turn and not have to stop. And Gennaro was working there one day, and I remember driving towards there from the harbor, and Gennaro wasn't at his station. It's like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? Do I slow down? Because you don't want to, every time you wouldn't have to slow down because of flaggers, and he wasn't there. And it's like I got closer and closer, and all of a sudden the porta potty door opens, and he looks out and he's like this, "Go, go, go." So he was in the bathroom as I was coming down, and he flagged me on.
That looks like a good skit idea right there. Oh, that's pretty cool.
When I decided, in December, I worked up until December and decided to go to Seattle, and I was thinking I probably wasn't gonna. I don't know if I said that I was done working, because the snow was really kind of scary. We were working on the detach back then. To build that detach that's in the middle of the harbor, they built a road across from the old public works. Behind the old public works, they built a road across the channel.
Old public.
No. They didn't build a road. They built a bridge. So you have the channel and you have the little island that was there at the time. And so they built a bridge that would take our trucks and the heavy equipment over it. So we drove over there.
Is it like where by the staff quarters?
Yeah. It's
so the place
on behind. You know how the staff quarters are here. The old public works is right here, right next to the road. It was right on that little turn on the side where the lab side is. So we would drive in, take the turn in where that lab area is, and drive straight down, and go across the bridge. And they built up the land on little islands to accommodate the trucks to sit up there, because when we built the detach, they built the land over there to the detach, and then when they were done, they removed the land. So, but we would park up there. We would have to go in, turn before the bridge, reverse over the bridge, and go back down and sit until they flagged you in there, and you would have a loaded truck, and you could feel the truck sliding, especially when there was snow. You could just feel it inching. It just felt scary. It's like, I don't want to have an accident, because I remember Z in her tumbling truck, and I just didn't. It was getting worrisome. So at December, I decided I'm going to be done. I'm going to be done.
So it's pretty much like one-way traffic, just your truck.
They had a section in here when they
Where you
built
could
that
back up.
detach. They had a whole section that they built in, so like equipment was in there. They could house equipment there, or you could turn around, because the truck that was coming off would pull to the side, so you go down, and they would go back up and go across the bridge. So you're always going down across the channel backwards.
I wonder if anybody took pictures of those. That would be cool, because I
It was
remember.
that would have to have that bridge across there. It was
Yeah. And yeah, because I remember, I think I do have pictures of when they brought equipment in at Lucannon, and they built like this sandbar out to this barge that had all this equipment, and they brought it all in. So when people drive onto Lucannon right now, and now it's all full of sand, to the right of it, there was this road that heavy equipment came in on at that area. Same out at Marunik. They
Yeah.
brought equipment on island out there.
There was one fall storm. The breakwater was almost, I want to say, more than halfway built when we had our first fall storm that did a lot of damage in town, but the waves are going over the top of the breakwater. And I remember having to go to work and the waves going over the top of the vehicle. And it's like, they let me work like at least 3 hours before they said go home, because your windshield, your windows were all just covered with seawater, and you couldn't see. And there was foam going all the way up into the old gas station. I remember that. It was quite the storm.
The old gas station was kind of like a little bit across from the old machine, where the machine shop, old machine shop still stands. Do you recall, like you mentioned, Kiewit as the company? They brought in other people,
They did.
and
They
there
did.
were
They
other
had their whole
people.
crew.
They lived in trailers, I think. Do you remember what that all
Trailers,
looked
and I don't know. I know that they fed all of the people who they brought in. The King Ider was open then, and I don't know if they contracted with TDX or who they did, but there were people that were working at the restaurant who made they fed them breakfasts down there, and they gave them brown bag lunches. But I remember there was this guy who would get, and most of those guys, some of them were truck, but a lot of them were heavy equipment operators, and they were their mechanics as maybe their engineering crew and stuff. But one of the guys who worked on the equipment, they would pack his big lunches, and he would feed a fox. He had one fox down at the harbor, and he spent the whole time working to get that fox closer and closer to try to feed him out of his hand. And I think he by the time they were done, that fox would get pretty close to him.
It's the story is that foxes didn't come into the village until they started building the harbor because of people feeding them. They had access to food that when I was a kid, we never really saw them walking around town.
You'd see their eyes. I mean, you didn't even really see them in the daylight. You would see their eyes at night out in the, it wasn't until we went to St. George for some reason, it was the first time I saw a fox in the daylight.
Yeah.
And
in the village.
There
it was different.
Because I remember being in their hotel over there, and I thought somebody was dying and screaming. And it was like, what is that? What is it? It was a fox. That was the first time I'd heard them up close.
So with housing people, I vaguely remember when you were driving, were there trailers kind of across from the King Ider that housed people? I know there ended up being a couple of trailers. Maybe it was connected to the fishing
Slim,
industry.
the guy that he was the one who said, you should stay with the company and you could go, work other places. I think he brought the trailer up here that was over by Cape Nurse, because he brought his wife with him. His wife was, I think she was, I want to say Alaska Native, and they lived in the trailer, so they didn't have to stay with the people, everybody else in their bunkhouses. And
Where were the bunkhouses?
I don't even remember.
Yeah, for some reason
I don't know if
remember.
those were the buildings that Unipac ended up using, if they were down there on this, by Cape Nurse. There was that whole trailer there.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were the ones that brought it here.
I don't remember. I know that there was like 2 or 3 that were connected, but I felt like there were trailers, like when you drive the Hall Road now from the post office towards King Ider, just in that area on the Hall Road, before where that cement pad is. I thought there were trailers there, but I'm not sure.
I don't remember. I know that when we were working on that, the breakwater was when Trident was being built, because watching the progress from there being nothing, digging out that whole section and laying the groundwork to building it up, we kind of watched Trident build up from there, as well as we used to have the other company that came out here that besides Coastal, Sunmar Sea. They brought their own. We had more boats that came out here that brought. I don't know if they brought items like Coastal did, or if they were specifically for Trident or for fishing. But there were Sunmar boats. There were 3 of them that came out here,
Oh yeah.
and they brought material and stuff. I think that company went out of business shortly
Yeah.
after that.
So then you ended your truck driving era.
I ended my truck driving, and I came back and didn't have a job by that time. Aaron was in preschool, which is in this building. We had preschool in this building, and I got hired to work at Reeve, which was the airline that came out here before Pen Air and Raven and all of these other ones. And it was a bigger airline. They had 30 seaters to up into 86, depending on what airline that came out here. And so that building, the office was underneath the store where the beer hall is now, which is a very cold place in the winter, like working in an ice box. And right next to it, right across the street, I mean, it was like 3 car widths away, was Unipac, the crab processing plant at the time. So there were people coming in here all the time. It was very busy. We had people coming in for fishing. There were so many boats, and we would do all the reservations from here down in the office too. Because I remember booking a Coast Guard. He came in with his travel request, and he was going to go to Germany, and booking his ticket all the way to Germany. And you could do that kind of thing here back then. But it was. So we worked down there. We worked and stayed there for lunches, and so we worked all the plane days.
Were there like not every day there was a plane?
No, that wasn't every day there was a plane, but Sundays usually, and I don't remember what days of the week. So all of the luggage and everything, people would bring it there, and we would house it there. And the city was contracted to move everything, so they would come in, pick up the luggage, load it onto the planes, and then drop off the luggage. And so people would just be hanging around there until their flight came. I don't think there were ever any chairs in there. There were just people standing around for hours. I think there were seats out in the hallway, like benches or something. Yeah, so we'd always smell cooking crab.
What years? What year was
that? Was 1990. I worked there from 1990 to 1993 when I got pregnant with Kara. And I was working down there, and the finance director at the time at the thing wanted to hire me. Kept working on me, and the final thing that made me go to work for the city was like, we have daycare. It's like, yeah. Even back then, daycare was a struggle.
Yeah.
Actually, when I worked for Reeve, we didn't have. You worked the plain days and you didn't work the other days. So I remember having 4 jobs. I worked there. I worked up here at the city for Phyllis on the non-plain days. I worked in her department and did a lot of typing. And I got a job at the school where I was teaching crafting. I was teaching beading. And then that's when I started cutting hair. So it's 4 jobs to make ends meet in the 90s.
So the Reeves time, who were other folks that were employed, or who was moving luggage with the city?
It was. Yeah. different
Like
people.
it was Mike Zaharoff was
Mike Zaharoff was the manager. Laura was the second in line. Me, myself, and Marva worked there. Marva Lynn. Marva was pregnant with Megan then. And we would drive out here. We would take all the reservations. And we'd drive out to the airport, and Mike Z would drive like a madman all the way out to the airport. So we would meet the plane and talking on his radio. And when it was foggy, we would drive back and forth between like the reindeer corral and Palavina, and they would look at the temperature and look at the tower by the Coast Guard and look at the the window ceiling, because we even had all the fog back then. But he named, when Marva being pregnant with, on the other side of Palavina, if you drive over there, it almost looks like a woman laying down with the pregnant stomach. So he named it Mount Marva. So I called Palavina Mount Marva. So I remember, and one time Mike and Laura both out of town, so I was driving out there and driving down like a bat out of H.E.'s heck down towards the reindeer corral, and we hit the bumpy spots, and Marva's being pregnant. She starts bouncing. I was like, put on your seatbelt. So
Was it a van? Or
it was a suburban. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It was a suburban, and we would go out and meet the flights and do all the weight and configuration, the weight and balance, and.
So, at that time, was the plane pulling in at the POSCAP side or the other side?
No, this is POSCAP wasn't even used, so they were pulling over onto the apron on the other side where the DOT building is now, and this was before the road to the airport looks like it does now. It was a straight shot from the Coast Guard to the airport, straight shot looking at the weather service, and then you would turn into the airport, and. I didn't realize up until this year that it kind of still happens nowadays, but back then everybody went out to the airport to see the plane come in, because it was just something to do. And I see a lot of people do that now. But the parking was like horizontal to the road that's going out of town, so all the cars parked behind these blocks, but we could drive over to the plane and meet the plane. And it was interesting because back in the 80s, they were trying to recruit people to work on the boats and everything. So they were ads in Seattle newspapers, and you would see people come off the plane totally ill-prepared for Alaska. It's February, March, January, and they're coming off in T-shirts and cowboy hats and cowboy boots and the ice and the snow, and just not being totally, prepared for, what to expect, because they didn't know. Lack of information. They were just going to go get their millions.
And tour seasons.
Tour season.
So then, I don't know how that worked with Reeves or how people booked.
I think TDX ran it then. This was there was Pen Air back then too. Pen Air was run by Becky Filimonoff out of her house. So people would leave their luggage and stuff at her house, and this is the funny story. There was one day the guy comes in and he's looking for his reservation. He doesn't have it. And it's like, maybe we didn't have it. Maybe your reservation is with Pen Air. And so we had a VHF. Then we had graduated from CBs to VHF radios. But we had the little handheld mic that you see, you squeeze the trigger and talk into it. And he came from someplace else with no experience of VHF. So he grabs the hand mic and he's like, Pen Air, reading. And then he puts the mic up to his ear, waiting for them to answer. Pen Air, reading. and back then, I mean, there were so many people traveling all the time. The fishing companies, before being regulated by having to have IDs and stuff, they would just buy mass tickets with different people's names. Did not even match the person, and they would just be handing them out at the, this is your ticket, this is your ticket. They didn't have to provide ID. They just had to have their boarding pass, and they were good to go. I remember we had people in the building who, I want to say they were off a processor, and they were all illegal. They were here illegally. Didn't speak any English, and the processing company was not treating them right. They were being not abused, but they just weren't being treated fairly, basically, forced to work and stuff. And somehow they ended up, somebody found out, or somebody, so they they were brought here so they could be taken someplace else because the company got in trouble for it. But just things like that happened. Probably still does.
Do you remember like the number of people that was that? It was a group of people.
It was a group of
like,
people, so it was a lot.
like-
They came off a processor, and they were all
Like 20
legal.
people or
probably
more?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, I've experienced that with when they had the Unice, the Arctic Star, and Trident was here, I think, and going. There was like a what do they call it when there was a strike, and they had like 300 people, 200 people. There was like 900 people down here, and we decided to do. Karen Holzer and myself decided to do some educational stuff and free hands, maybe take people out to go do clean up beaches. And I think it was on Unice. They had these phones, and people would be calling their families, and we did a little talk. Took like seal fur and stuff to talk to people about who we are, and walking past, there was some guy who, in poor English, broken English, said, please tell my wife I am not working. I can't send money. So it was really an eye-opener, and I felt like, my goodness, we've just created an industry here where people are forced labor.
Some of them work
And-
like 90 hours a week.
Yeah. That's what we came from. We were slaves of the harvest,
Yeah.
and here we were like now locked in it.
I know that hearing this after when I worked for the city, like when there was a strike, a lot of them, the people that are here, they don't get paid. They actually have to pay because they're costing the company to live here. So they have to pay the company back with money that they don't have because they've already sent it to their families and stuff. I remember having people outside. I want to say they were outside the rec hall, but somebody needed to go home, and all of the people that he worked with, all his friends, were putting together all the money, for him to be able to get out of here.
Wow.
So the company Trident, back as much as a few years ago, they don't help with anything like that.
Wow. So post Reeve time frame, if you want to share anything about post Reeve, what you did then, and also the crafting, basket weaving. You went from crocheting see-through Barbie clothes when you were really little to what you do now.
I think Max was here at the time and maybe staying at your house. And this was, I worked at Reeve, and then I went to work for when I was working at Reeve, I was crafting. Roseanne, I think, had left some beaded stuff here and some beaded parts. And so I decided I wanted to learn how to bead. And so Max gave me the stuff that she had. So didn't have any books or anything like that. So I was eyeballing what she did and trying to copy what she did. And it's like, how did people live before internet? How did you see things? I don't remember any of that. But so I started making things. When you were at Reeve, I mean, you could check people in, and when the rest of it was done, you basically sat in your chair like this, waiting for the plane to come, and you didn't have much to do. So I started taking crafting things down there. So when I learned how to bead, I was making things down there and then selling them in the city gift shop. So that was another thing I did. So I learned how to make earrings. I learned how to make sun catchers. And back then it was Unipack that was here. And Julie Shane was their main person down here in the office. She bought a lot of stuff that I made so she could gift them to people that she worked with in other countries, Japan and stuff. So all their people that they sold crab to. So she bought a lot of my stuff. So my stuff's out there in other countries too.
At that time, the hotel was in town, right?
The hotel was there, yeah.
Yeah. And did they have a gift? They had a gift shop too, I think. But I don't know if it was like. I
don't think they ever had anything like locally made. It was just like stuff you could buy that said St. Paul that I know of, anyways. Yeah, I worked there when I was a teenager.
How is it
but I
that
don't
we
remember.
had the city get into the gift shop arena? Or how did that happen?
I think
was
they
it
just-
post curio shops? Because there was Steve and Ann's curio shop and Alice's, and there were these transitions of
Yeah, I may have been like because Phyllis's dad made jewelry, and that may have started it with a place to sell things that came from Island.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had stuff in there. And there was, I remember there being a weather service person here at the time, and his wife was a crafter, and she made things with glitter and things and sold them there. I still, one of her things that I bought for Christmas, I still use to this day.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then I went to work after Reeve, and I got pregnant with Kara when I came back. I had her in Seattle, and when she was about 3 months old, I came to work for the city and worked at the city and have been there ever since 1993 to now. And this place was the daycare up until 2000. So Kirk was young, little, and when the daycare closed, and so it was a struggle to find babysitters for him.
Mm-hmm.
Tried quite a few things. Tried babysitting at other people's houses, my house. Our sister June babysat for a while, and June is deaf, and we would. Kirk, even when he was little, when he was in preschool, he was a heavy sleeper in the morning. So you'd take him into, they had a school bus then when we go to preschool, basically dress him up. And they had breakfast at school too, so I could dress him up, carrying him into the bus, and he'd be asleep until he got to school. Parents took turn riding the bus with the kids too, so there was always a parent in the bus. And and one time, when June babysat for a while, and I would take him over there sleeping, and one morning he woke up on the couch, and June was in the bathroom. The door was open, but she had the light off, but the door was open. And Kirk got up and thought he was there by himself. So he started to walk down the road, and Phyllis picked him up right about where the post office is, because he was going to come to find me. It was like 8:30 in the morning, spring. And I thought after that, maybe he'd want a guy to babysit, maybe more comfortable. So I asked Travis Merkoliev to babysit. And so Travis would come to the house and watch him. And Travis calls me one morning and says, "Your boy's outside. He won't come in until you come home." He's standing by the fence. He's like, "Nope, I don't like this babysitter either." So I was glad when he was able to get to school. So he's a school-age kid.
So parenting through and into the 2000s.
Yeah. 20-year age difference between Aaron and Ethan. Ethan, I was 40, not expecting to be having a kid at 40. Labor hurts really bad at 40. I'll tell you that. Your muscles change if you're not physically active. So, yeah, Ethan was my buddy. Like all your kids are your buddies, or your best pal. It's so sad when they start to outgrow you when they're teenage years, until to adulthood, when they're little, like they're like this with you. So yeah, Ethan was like the questioner. He'd 20,000 questions. He never stopped talking, and I think you experience this when he would never just ask you a direct question. "Hey mom, what about this?" He'd say, "Hey mom." And you'd have to say what before he would answer your ask you your question. You couldn't just, he wouldn't just say it. He'd wait for you to respond. Maybe it had to do with hearing things. When you get older, you don't hear things in our house. It's like you just have to say things twice for every time.
I am remembering fondly going up and hanging out with him when he was little, and also sometimes going up there and you were standing up basket weaving.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't sit down.
That's right. See here, there's a rambling. You asked about crafting. So yeah, I learned how to bead, and I think Ethan was little when I decided. I learned how to basket weave from Doris when they had it down at the school. Back at second grade, I remember there being basket weaving, and it was all ages, I think, and pottery, and it was always something that I found interesting and it intrigued me. And Ethan was little, or maybe it was before he was born, I decided I wanted to learn again. Well, actually, I was crocheting forever before he was born. I crocheted myself into a sling, and I had to keep my hand immobile for a while because I was crocheting too much. And so then I wanted to learn how to basket weave. I've learned how to sew. But yeah, when I spent a lot of time looking at the information that you gave me. I spent a lot of time having Debbie reteach me how to do things because I would forget every time I got to the point. But it took me a few years before I actually made an actual basket. I had a lot of starts and a lot of circular things, a lot of look like little lids for stuff. And once I learned how to turn up the basket, then I had to learn how to embroider the basket, and then I had to learn how to end the basket. So it took years before I actually completed one.
It's not like you can like do a turn your basket today and turn your basket tomorrow and turn your. You have to wait till you start a whole other basket to turn it. And I remember, I think we had our office down at the old lab building that used to be the Public Works, and you would come down. Okay, can you show me again? Like, we were just like redoing it, it kept my skill set up.
Yeah.
I was remembering how to do it and I think that's important. Like someone asking somebody keeps up their knowledge or their abilities when they're asked.
Mac made me dowels, so I use dowels to hold the baskets to keep their shape. So I weave around, when I do baskets, I weave around the dowels, and then I weave the lid around the bottom of the basket before I finish it. And so I'll start the lid before I finish the bottom. I haven't made it's been a few years since I've made a basket, but what I started when I first did was I kept my first basket and I sold my second, and then I thought, this is something you could make money of. So I started making them to sell them. But I've listed every basket that I've made, the size of it, what the colors are on it, and who ended up with the basket. So I've tracked. I tried to do that with all the other things that I made, the earrings and stuff, but it's just too much. So I've only tracked those and the little basket earrings that I made. And I had the count of how many baskets and earrings I've made, but I don't remember what they are. I want to say 90-something baskets, actual baskets, and then at least 200 pairs of earrings that I've made to date. I haven't made little basket earrings in a while. I got lazy, I think. I think it's when we got in COVID. I started to do other things in COVID, and I got lazy with the basket weaving. And when I tried to go back and make a pair of earrings, they kind of look crappy. It's like, you can't stop doing things, or else you're gonna, if you don't use it, you lose it, and that very definitely applies.
That's so true. I noticed that like when I was making stuff with seal throat back when Mom was still alive, and trying to pick it up, it's like, man, my stitches are just sloppy. They don't look like they did back then.
I'm working on a seal throat basket now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it like raffia when in your early times learning too? Like
It is. It was. It's all been raffia. I've never woven with grass. I had an opportunity once to buy grass off of eBay, and I didn't get it. It was bidding. Back then it was, you couldn't just buy it off, or you just had to bid on it, and I didn't bid. So I've never woven with grass.
Yeah.
I want to. And then maybe this summer I'll try to dry some again. I tried one year when we had a trailer by our house to dry some grass because I was going to use the space to lay it all out. So I got burlap sacks and everything and followed the procedures, and they didn't turn. They got moldy. And
I know that Doris taught all of us with raffia, and she would, if I recall correctly, she had said that that the grass here, it was not easy it was different.
Yeah.
Not what she remembered the grass in Alaska was like when she was younger.
I joined a couple Facebook groups about basket weaving. There are some Unangan in Seattle that go out and collect grass, and hoping to learn something from it, but I never did. Like, you ask for a description of the grass, and people, tell you what they know, or they don't want to share because they don't want you to, to take their stuff and learn it.
Yeah.
So hopefully someday I'll learn how to dry grass and weave with grass.
Did Jolene try that? Did she
Grass?
try weaving with local grass?
I don't know.
It might have been she tried. I think she might have. I saw a basket in on Alaska that was woven out of intestine.
Wow.
So a person had, I wish I remember
They
the
leave it
name.
wet?
So no, they dry it, and it's kind of like similar to seal throat. I don't know what kind of seal it was. It wasn't fur seal, and so they split and made like strands. So I don't know if it's possible to do it with seal throat as well, but the person who it was in a shop wasn't the one that wove it, but she said the person who wove it said she'd probably never do it again. So I was like, okay, I don't think I'm going to try to go there then, because I thought, oh, maybe we can, because you have a piece, you have what is it called, sinew, like they would like cut it in such a way so that, like those circular things we get to tie the drumsticks, like if you make circular stuff, you cut it, you can get a long piece. So I was thinking maybe that could be done with seal throat.
You get cord like that, like
Yeah.
from craft stock and black elk leather,
Yeah,
which I wish was still around. Have
I
you ever
do
been there?
too.
It was like the best. They had
Yeah.
everything. They had stuff for crafting. They had patterns for
Right.
cussbucks, and they had beads, and they were a
Everything.
great
and
place.
They just like abruptly shut down. Almost.
Well, they shut down. They moved across the street for a few years.
Yeah.
That was on Old Seward.
Yeah.
And they moved. It was really funny because we went there the last time we went there. Mac knew the guy who was there. He was somebody who he knew from a long time ago. And then they shut down after that.
Yeah.
They were a great resource.
Yeah. I just wonder why that happened. Yeah. Do you feel like anything? You feel like we missed anything? Are you kind of surprised at
Yeah.
all the stuff that we like talked about? Yeah. So, if there isn't anything that's popping out for you now that you want to like talk about,
I'll think about it at 7:00
you
tonight.
will. That's what Mac said too. He was like, "Man, I thought about a whole bunch of other stuff after I went home." So, to kind of go into closure nowadays, what do you think about where we are as a community nowadays, or where you are yourself with good things, with concerns, community, the ecology, anything you want to share your thoughts, post-pandemic, state of the government, anything? Retirement.
Sometime soon. I don't know when.
Yeah.
I could. I mean, I've been with the city for 30 years, so I could retire.
Yeah.
I heard somebody just say, "Are you retired? You're bored?" There's so many things to do. There's so many. I would probably craft all day. I have projects that I haven't done yet that I haven't learned yet that I'm gonna learn.
Yeah.
And so hopefully my hands will still work. I got hands like you. They're getting crooked.
Yeah.
They're getting painful and stuff, but I think if you stop using them, that makes them worse.
Right.
So
You don't wanna do
definitely
that.
keep on moving, keep on using your hands.
Yeah.
It's the vision thing. I don't know. Like when I hear people might leave, I get really sad. I don't want to see.
For this place. Yeah.
We may not be as close as we used to be, but how many people can say, I know 300 people,
Right.
I know their kids. It's
Yeah.
special.
Yeah. That's a good thing for here. There was somebody that had said they were amazed at 4 generations of people, like they don't even know their grandmother or
Yeah.
and we have 4 generations of families here.
You think, we experience a lot. You experience the births, you experience the death, and it's all close to you. I mean, you may not be in day-to-day contact with them, but you feel it. I mean, people outside of here, they might, you live in a big city, you might know people, a handful. They don't get to experience that. We experience it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And it just makes you love everybody more.
Right. Sweetens the life. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Looking back, what would you have to say that you feel like you know now about living? You did share earlier about parents and how they've lived to know things. What do you say you know now about living a happy, successful life?
I would say if you want to do something, do it. Don't let fear, being shy, those things hold you back. Those things help you to, they stunt you. They don't make you grow. They don't make you learn. Be proud of who you are. Be proud of that you have a culture, that you share this life with 300-400 other people, and get to know them, get to know their names. I could share a story about Kirk, when Kirk was little, and I don't know why. I won't share that story.
Come on.
Oh no, it was Didor, and for some reason he didn't misheard his name, and was fascinated with Didor, but he heard his name as Beadler, so. I don't call him that to his face, but when we talk about Dieter, he was always Beadler to us. Just because Kirk also did the thing where he misheard Ananga and he said Ahana. So we don't say Ananga, I say Ahana. I think you learn things from kids, and kids are funny. I always like to share stories. I share stories on Facebook of my kids because I want to remember them, because kids say the darndest things and they're hilarious without knowing, but it's things that you'll remember forever. Mm-hmm. I'll be 80 and I'll be still saying Beadler.
I don't know if it was you or Julianne that didn't say they heard Kukuchaya as cookie jar. Do you remember that?
That wasn't me.
That might have been Julianne. She thought her name was Cookie Jar, but they called her Kukuchaya. She heard cookie jar.
Yeah, I feel like people who have passed on before, you knew when you were a kid. So I feel honored to remember them now, like Kukuchaya and people. Hopefully that the younger kids pay attention to who their elders are and what their family, and get to learn story. If they don't even know, if they don't know them, learn the stories about them, because
right.
it's a history you can share.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad, because like even these island time visits we've been doing, people are remembering things, and so we're just like, ask your grandparents to tell you stories. Grandparents, tell your kids the stories, and even if it doesn't seem like they're listening to the Lunatic Fringe, they're hearing it, and they'll remember it. And it may be that it doesn't seem like they appreciate it, but they will. And that's just putting it out there, telling the stories, the funny ones, the sad ones, all of them. Any regrets looking back? Anything you would?
I can't, because I wouldn't have what I have now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to appreciate it all, the good, the bad, and everything that came with.
Yeah.
It's just all part of the journey.
Yeah. So no regrets that you stuck with Kiewit and went to other places.
You know, if I probably could have traveled more, I think I would have taken that opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to see places that I hadn't seen, because I'm thinking,
Right.
I know I'm never going to go to Japan. You know.
Yeah.
It's just.
Yeah.
It's just.
But
that
you're
way
not
it is.
sharing it as a regret thing.
No.
It's just
no.
wonder
Just to
what
have
would
that
happened.
experience.
Yeah. I've always wondered what would have happened if I, for example, did not like wearing dresses. And I thought that if female teachers had to wear dresses, and I would have folks saying, "You'd be a good teacher." And I was like, I don't want to wear dresses. I don't want to be a teacher.
Yeah.
Being influenced to now, I'm okay with wearing a dress.
I kind of wonder sometimes what it would have been like if I had not come back, if I had stayed out there. But I've never been like a socially outgoing person. I've always kind of stood back and stuff. So I've never made friends easily, I guess, because I'm not going to go out there and put myself out there.
Yeah.
Like I said, people should just now. Do it, everybody but me. I mean, yeah, be less shy. That would be, I guess, a regret is not being more open to people.
So you didn't have to worry. You did well. You had folks you knew, like when you went to Palmer. There wasn't like, because I went to West High and I had that feeling of, gosh, I got to know how to make friends because I didn't have anybody that I
Yeah.
knew until Helen and Anna came. They ended up going to West High, but they didn't start when I did. But I was like, man, I have to like figure out how to make friends. Like, I don't even know how all my class. We just like we're friends because
Yeah.
we don't even remember since when.
I had no connection to that school, being there only the 1 year and graduating from there. So I didn't go to prom. I mean, I walked down and did graduation and it was just gone. It was just, I had no connection other than that so if you're going to school, stick it out and make friends and
Right.
have pride in it. Everybody always says it's the best time you're going to have, and the kids don't ever listen until day after graduation. They're like, man, I should have done this or I should have done that.
And you have
And
had
pride at his graduation, realizing, it's over.
Like speaking of, little backtracking here, all of your kids except Dita, Ethan, have graduated here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He
From
was the
school.
only one, and I tell you, I don't know how people did it. The day he left, I literally sat on the couch and cried. I cried before he got I cried from weeks before, but I sat there. I couldn't do anything. I just cried that whole day up until night.
Yeah.
And then the next day, and then it got better and better. And I don't know how people did it with multiple kids for multiple years. I mean,
Yeah.
now you have internet, now you have, you can talk, but before people were gone, maybe from August until maybe May.
Yeah.
They didn't come back. They, didn't have a way to communicate.
Yeah. Mom said that to me when I was like, because there wasn't that full high school here. And I think maybe even after you left, they might have brought it back to 10th grade because you were here through 11th grade.
Yeah.
But at some point, I felt like they stopped it at 10th grade. Maybe when Monetchcom reopened, I don't know what happened there, but it only went through 10th grade.
I think that's what
or
maybe
ninth grade,
they decided. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Michael, same thing. He's in 7th grade. I'm like, my kid's going to leave? I couldn't, it was like, and I was talking with Mom, and she was like, I had to do that 8 times or something like that. I was like, I don't even want to do it once. I want that option for my child to be here. I couldn't imagine someone else being with him, but Michael, and so it was like, it felt like a solo act because there weren't too many people that supported a full high school here that lived here, and it was very tough going to those meetings and having to stick out like a sore thumb. And I worked at the school too. And then Damien graduated from here, and he's the one that lives the farthest away. But when Katya was first, she wanted to go to Mount Edgecombe. Kara came with us. Kara was a little one hanging out with Phil and I, and getting Katya on the plane, and feeling that sadness and crying. And I didn't want to come home right away. So we went to Lacannon Beach, and she had a ball. Kara had a ball. She called me Goopy Debbie, and she rolled the ball, or she had the ball, and she was behind me, and she's like, Goopy Debbie, and I turned around and I saw her, and I just started crying because I was like, my daughter is not even here, and here's Kara. Just yeah, that sad feeling of your child leaving at such a young age.
That was one of the things. There was one summer I worked for TDX. When I worked from 11 till all the way through, every summer and after schools and stuff. I worked at Alice's shop, and when I worked TDX at the front desk for a maid for a couple years, and then the front desk when their office was where the annex is now. And 1 year, that was back when seal stick business was past Dad operating it, and the TDX took over it, and they did the seal harvest and collected the seal sticks and stuff. And 1 year, Larry came up to me and Larry Merkuliev gave me another duty. I had to count all the seal sticks and balls. So I counted 22,000 seal sticks and 40,000 balls because they were all boxed in the basement, in a warm basement with the furnace. That's all I smelled for a week. I couldn't smell anything else. Even when I went home, that's all I smelled. I wanted to put that on a resume.
In 1 week, 22,000.
Yeah. So it already had been counted, but before they were packaging and putting it in boxed and before they were going to ship them off, they wanted a recount.
They were collected all summer though, not in 1 week. So they have
Susan
to dry.
Butcher and Ded Munson would come out
yeah.
here and work out at the
They would collect out of the byproducts
plants. Yeah.
to get seal for the dogs. Her musher. She was a musher. Yeah. So Alice's shop, when you worked in it, that was like you were really young.
I started working at when their shop was by Sheena and Yaitop's house underneath this building, and I don't know. I don't know if I asked or I kept asking because I know you worked there when and I was wanted to copy you. I think so. I got to work there for a while before they moved the business up to their house. When they moved their business up to their house, I didn't work there, but they had an ice cream shop for a little while, and I think I worked there for a little while.
Yeah,
It didn't last very long.
And they had a burger palace.
The Burger Palace.
I didn't like to, but I remember when I was working for her down here in the coffee shop, and she had told me to come by her house sometime, and I don't know if I walked all the way up or if Dad dropped me off. I don't have no recollection. I was pretty young then, and she said, "I have this idea." And so I went into their house, 150, and we went in the back room, and she had on top of the bed, she had all these things she was buying that were like little gifts, little trinkets, little toys. And it wasn't like a huge amount, but she said, I want to make like a little gift shop, a shop for people to buy little stuff. And this is getting started, and I would like you to work for me. So I was like, okay. And so, yeah, she ran it in the basement. Sometimes I'll dream about going there and buying stuff. It's kind of cool.
I think when she had the coffee shop down here, I didn't work there long. Maybe I was too young, or maybe I wasn't tall enough or good enough. I thought I was tall until I realized, I went to other places and realized, no, I'm really short. But I worked up at the coffee shop, or up at the cafe. I mean, not the cafe, but the little gift shop. But I remember I never got a ride there either. I'd have to, and there were no street lights.
Yeah.
I'd have to walk up and walk down. And when you walk down, I ran all the time.
Because
it was dark past the graveyard. I used to be happy when Sheena and Yaitop went there late because they had flashlights, and I'd walk down with them. Other than that, I ran home. But I think you have a book out here that I made in the school. It was me sitting there.
Yes.
With the cash register that old fashioned with the push buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you talked about it, because now when we illustrate these, I know we have that illustration. And we've scanned those books, and we're going to use them. We're using them with the kids for learning language. So it was like that picture, you in the gift shop, reading a book.
Yeah, I was a reader. Just to be able to read all night. Now if I lay down to read, I could last about 10 minutes and I'm sleeping.
That was a
Gina
good
and Yaitop's were Father Victor.
Yeah.
So you had those doors to the basements and too, right? Was that
outside.
Like
Yeah.
How it worked to get to
Like Platanita has it too. Yeah.
The house was so different then. They used to have the living room area was to be a long living room. And Sheena and Yaitop, I always think about it when we decorate over here at the rec hall for Christmas, because they always had streamers. Used to have hours and hours of fun with playing volleyball with balloons over the top of those streamers.
Yeah, they put Yaitop decorated that long living room with streamers and lights, and they'd squeeze 30 plus people in for dinners in that house down here.
We had wall-to-wall people with the kids doing all the dishes.
Yeah. we ate on the stairs. It had a second story too. That I think supposedly wasn't too safe any longer, so they had to take it out. Yeah. It's too bad they didn't figure out a way to fix it. Yeah, folks walking up to the gift shop, right? Even popcorn grandma Marina with her flashlight walking past here to go sell popcorn in the show. Old lady with her flashlight.
Even your dad, the basement, you have the cafe down there.
Yeah,
That is so like
yeah,
nice to have that kind of space.
right. He did start, and I think he gave a little bit of money to the church. They started selling plates of food in the church school, and it was just like lunch, I think, like sandwiches. And I like to tell the story of how they're looking at it, and mom didn't like the display of the sandwich in the plate, and she was like, I don't know, it just looks plain. And dad said, put a pickle on it, because they would have parsley in other restaurants. You know, they have a little green parsley, but they don't have parsley here. So he said, put a pickle on it.
I think then they started doing dinners. I think that's how the specials came to be. Whenever they had their cafe, there was always a special, which was
Yeah.
something other than a burger.
Yeah. So they used that church school space for a very short period of time while he revamped the basement.
It's hard when you're a teenager, though. It's like when your parents have a restaurant in your house. So my mom would start making chili like before 8 in the morning. So you had to try to eat breakfast and get out the door before she started cooking those onions on the stove, or
You
you'd smell like
smell like it all
onions
day.
all day. You don't want to be a
Right.
teenager smelling like onions and bacon.
Yeah. Making pies,
And
running out of
think
buns.
about what they did with that restaurant, because at their age, I mean, if
Yeah.
he was 52 and she was 46 when they had me, when they had that restaurant, I was a teenager and working in there, and they started in the morning making the chili, making mom especially making the donuts and the specials for the day, working the restaurant, doing the cooking, and then cleaning up that whole entire space after. They hired Sheena to clean, but sometimes, you know, she'd be sweeping and mopping that whole place like
Right.
every night at the end
And
of the day.
the food was prepared upstairs and it was being brought. She was carrying all that food down into the basement to sell it.
They're stronger than I am, definitely.
Yeah. So I guess I think with us working at a young age, it was basically not to be afraid of work, and that work is gonna give you something. So I always felt like, and plus they had a pre-salary, so.
So he'd tally his things. He kept track of costs and kept track of things with those old government pens on those little tiny tablets. You could smell that pen. Just thinking about
Yeah.
it. The ink was always really strong smelling.
Yeah.
Every time I come across those, I keep those pens.
I think I had a notebook that he had a detailed notebook of how much he was spending on fuel and paying for electricity and paying for freight and bringing soda pops and bringing stuff into the business. He had it all penciled in this notebook.
Yep.
Really very good, tracking mechanisms. No computers.
Nice.
He was the computer.
He was.
Sandali.
Oh,